Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so that you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I'm Melissa Blasek. I'm a former New Hampshire state representative and the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. Today, we are going to talk about interpersonal relationships and the soap opera that is legislative chambers across America. Why do I want to talk about this? I want to talk about this because, number one, it is a soap opera. And it is actually just sort of interesting from that perspective, and just pure entertainment perspective. But it's important to understand political dynamics in your legislative chamber, so that you know who to talk to, how to talk to them, who to go after, what to do. If you don't familiarize yourself, and it takes time too, there's a learning curve certainly, but if you don't take the time to have those conversations with the legislators and get a handle and a feel on who is who and what the power structures are, what the soap opera is, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to effectively be an activist. So last week was what we call Organization Day in New Hampshire. It is the day that the state legislators get sworn in for the upcoming term. And amongst themselves, they elect the speaker. All right. So previous to Organization Day, both the Republican and the Democrat caucus will caucus, meaning they will meet up amongst themselves only, and they will elect their nominee for speaker. Now, it should be quite obvious that if one party is in control, has a majority versus the other one, that it'll be very clear which of those two nominees will win, right? If we have a Republican House majority, the Republican nominee for speaker should win because all the Republicans should vote for that person. However, and we are not unique, this does happen in other states, even in very, very deep red states, which New Hampshire is not. This happened to us several years ago. In New Hampshire politics, we call it pulling a Jasper. Sean Jasper was a very moderate, middle-of-the-road Republican state rep. And he was not the Republican nominee for speaker coming into Organization Day. But he decided he wanted to be speaker. And so he went and made deals with the Democrats to get all of the Democrats to support him. And you got to give away quite a bit power to be able to get Democrats to vote for a Republican candidate for speaker. And then he got enough moderates to peel off and vote for him that he won and became speaker in a huge upset. It was very, very dramatic. And it was kind of, frankly, a waste of a term because he was a Republican. He had given away so much power to Democrats. So many Republican priorities got taken care of that term. And in fact, then he did it again. And anyway, the only way we got him out of there, because he had made these deals with Democrats, was that eventually our governor put him in a bureaucratic role and got him out of the House. We have had in New Hampshire, Sherm Packard has been speaker since 2021. So for 2 terms, he was running again for a 3rd term as speaker. Sherm Packard is, just so we kind of get dynamics here. Oh, and by the way, I know that some state reps in New Hampshire watch the show, and I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. However, your feathers might be ruffled. And this is just my 1,000-foot view. I'm not in there anymore, guys. Okay. But this is my 1,000-foot view of what is going on and the dynamics that are going on. It's probably going to anger some of you. So Sherm Packard was traditionally, he voted as a moderate. However, what has happened over time is that by the time 2020 came around and that term began, that he became speaker, Liberty Republicans, which are, the more conservative wing In New Hampshire, they tend to have a streak that runs through them that's a little bit more on the Ron Paul end of the political spectrum, but they reigned supreme and they became the majority of the majority in the New Hampshire House. And so he was aware that that was the dynamics of the House. And so his majority leader was Jason Osborne, who is a Freedom Caucus type person. He is a Liberty Republican here in New Hampshire. And really, for I would say that term and maybe even the last term, he was probably the most conservative majority leader in America. And Jason Osborne was the majority leader for Sherm Packard for both of the terms that they've served. They were running sort of as a package deal again for this upcoming term that the speaker would make, Jason more than likely majority leader again. Now, I've had no real issues in or out of the legislature working with Jason Osborne because he and I agree politically on practically everything. We are very politically aligned. The speaker has just sort of allowed to happen whatever, Jason wanted from a policy perspective. He really runs the policy show. So while, the speaker does have a lot of power and everything, when it came to policy, really, it's been the majority leader that's been in charge of that. And, I was part of the Freedom Caucus in 2021. We were very united in our fight against the governor, but really we did not have to be united in a fight against leadership at that point because leadership was trying to give us everything that we wanted. So really, I guess what I'm trying to say is I haven't had a lot of problems. I'm not saying that Sherm Packard is a perfect person. He's not. He has made mistakes as speaker, but he it's been easy to work with. Okay. And I think that people have forgotten in the New Hampshire House how difficult it was with leadership before Sherm Packard, because it's almost been too many years and most people don't remember. And there's a huge turnover every term in the New Hampshire House. Okay. So, this term, there was a Republican challenger during the Republican caucus. So again, I said Republicans are going to get together. They're going to vote before organization day for their nominee. It's like a primary versus a general election. So there was a challenger, Len Turcotte, who is a Freedom Caucus guy, was challenging Sherm Packard. Now, this is my perspective. I have nothing against Len personally. He and I, again, we agree on practically every single policy. But it has felt to me over the last 2 years with him knowing that he wanted to be speaker. Again, there will always be types of people who just want power. That he has spent a lot of time not leading the Freedom Caucus, not even necessarily, not leading much of anything, and working people up and getting them in a tizzy so that they would not support Sherm Packard again. Again, I know some of you are going to be very upset by what I'm saying here, but that is my 1,000-foot view, is that he spent a lot of time and energy working people up and taking maybe divisions that were already there and making them into chasms. All right. When he was running, the people that he put around him that I would assume would therefore then be the people that he would put in charge of leadership positions if he had been the speaker were frankly not Freedom Caucus types. They were moderates on most issues. So I found that very concerning. Anyway, there were a lot of reasons why if I had been in the House, I probably would not have voted for Len. But I also wouldn't have been like terribly upset if he had one, other than I was concerned who would be in his leadership. And I was concerned that it was going to be people that I, even as an activist on the outside, was not going to have an easy time working with or getting what I wanted out of them. Okay. He lost the Republican caucus vote. Fine. That should have been the end of that. Now Sherm Packard is the nominee. Now we're going to rewind. 2022. I was in the House. One of my big projects and priorities was passing a parent bill of rights. Okay. And the chair of children and family law, which is where this bill was a woman by the name of Kim Rice. Kim Rice is, a little bit more, moderate on the moderate side. But she and I really, really disagree on some what I would consider to be fundamental issues, specifically when it comes to a parent's right to raise their child however they want. And at the time, she wanted to change this parent bill of rights to basically completely neuter it and make it meaningless. And she is quoted, and I'm not like not remembering this correctly. No, she's quoted in plenty of newspapers as saying that children have an inherent right to privacy from their parents. And I'm sorry, I do not believe that that's true. I don't believe that it is true that children should be able to keep secrets from their parents with government workers, i.e. teachers. Okay, that was really the main sticking point on this bill. So this bill has now worked its way through the House. It's worked its way through the Senate. It is now in committee of conference. A committee of conference is a very small group of some House members, some Senate members, when they have different ideas about what the bill should be. Okay. And they have to go in and hash it out. Otherwise, the bill dies. Okay. During that committee of conference, Kim Rice, again, she's fighting against it. She wants it to be this neutered, watered down version of the bill. The Senate actually wanted it to be the position that I wanted it to be. She went to the Attorney General. She mischaracterized leadership's position on the bill. The leadership wanted the Senate version as well. House leadership wanted the Senate version as well. And she got the Attorney General to write this legal opinion, basically saying that, yeah, children have an inherent right to privacy from their parents. And that legal opinion, by the way, has haunted us in court decisions. But what that legal opinion, so she lost because my organization and my activists blew up her cell phone so dramatically that she changed her phone number and she announced that she would not be seeking re-election. I considered that to be a win because I considered that great. I'm getting her out of the way. She was removed. So the Speaker of the House, Sharon Packard, did what I wanted, which was to have her removed from the committee of conference. They put in somebody who actually did represent the House leadership's position on the bill. We got it, but then what happened when it got back to the floor was that that legal opinion that she got from the Attorney General basically gave cover for the sort of rhino types to vote against the bill, and the bill died. And then the last 2 years we've tried, but we just haven't literally had the votes in the room because we've been at a tied majority. We were tied Republicans and Democrats. And every time that bill came up, we just simply did not have enough Republicans with butts in the seats. And so we've lost that. Now we have a real Republican majority again. This thing should sail through. Except that after the Republican caucus vote, so now Len Turcotte cannot, according to rules, he cannot go and challenge Sharon Packard and pull a Jasper, as we call it, and make a deal with the Democrats for himself and run for speaker. So this Kim Rice, again, a moderate, who only doesn't like Sharon Packard because, frankly, he took the conservative position on the Parent Bill of Rights and had her removed. She, it turns out, is going to run against Sharon Packard and is trying to make a deal with the Democrats and pull a Jasper. And she's got this very odd assortment of supporters that range from the conservative Freedom Caucus types that were backing Len Turcotte, who, I got to tell you again, had gotten real whipped into a frenzy by him from the right against Sharon Packard. And then we had the other types, like the rhino types that like Kim's politics better, frankly. And they haven't been happy with House leadership because it's been too conservative. So somehow she's got this weird faction of hard right people and squishy rhino types supporting her. And some people with just some personal grievances. I'm sorry, you guys, you got to stop with the personal grievance nonsense. I heard some petty reasons for supporting Kim, okay, and not going with the Republican majority nominee. Sorry. Okay, some real petty stuff. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not in the house, but I did start making phone calls because the last thing I want is the person that my activists probably chased out of office for good reason now going to be speaker just because a bunch of people cannot get their act together, and they both have decided that Sherm Packard is both too conservative and too much of a rhino, depending on which person you're talking to. Oh my goodness. There was almost a level of like Packard derangement syndrome going on amongst some people, like the people, say Trump derangement syndrome. There is some like Packard derangement syndrome almost. That has happened. All right. Well, ultimately, I think what happened, if I'm just reading the tea leaves, is that Kim did not manage to really get Democrats pulled over in a united front. And the only way she could have pulled this off is if every single Democrat had voted for her. And she just couldn't make it happen. So she ended up pulling out at the last minute. And Sherm Packard is now the Speaker of the New Hampshire House. Now, why am I telling you guys this? Because again, it's important to understand these interpersonal dynamics and how they work together. And now if you can get to know who are the people on the right, who are the people more to the middle, how do they view this? How do they view that? Right. You can work with them a little bit better. But my message to any state reps in New Hampshire who are watching is it is time to unite with your leadership. Take yes for an answer, because plenty of rhinos were unhappy with him because they thought he was too conservative, and especially that Jason Osborne has been too conservative, too friendly to the Liberty people. Okay. And that's probably the people watching this show. It is time to unite with them. Ask for what you want. You don't have to fight all the time. You already won. Your people are in leadership. Okay. Ask for what you want. You don't have to keep fighting. And unite in your fight with leadership against the Senate. The Senate is where the problems are. It's not always the House. And it's not always the Speaker. Again, that probably ruffled some feathers, but that's how I see it. Okay. That's my 1,000-foot view of what is going on. You guys almost got yourselves into some very hot water. Part of me wanted Kim Rice to win a little bit, just so that some of you would see what it actually means to fight leadership. Because some of you haven't been in the House long enough to know what it actually means to fight leadership. You don't have to fight. You could just ask for what you want. Ask and you shall receive. I have a couple more things I want to update you guys all on. But before we do that, just a word from our sponsors. Most people know that staying hydrated is essential to nearly every bodily function, but 75% of Americans still do not consume enough fluid daily. As we age, natural bodily changes make staying hydrated even harder, especially without artificial additives or excessive sugars. That's where Native Path comes in with extra help. Native Path's Hydrate is not just another drink mix. It's a thoughtfully designed formula with BCAAs and all 9 essential amino acids to help with muscle recovery and overall vitality. Plus, it's completely sugar-free and 100% natural. With their Native Hydrate product, you can fuel your body with essential electrolytes at the cellular level of overall vitality. And unlike other hydration drink mixes that are designed for marathon runners and contain upwards of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, Native Path contains just 230 milligrams of sodium. Yeah, I will not use those ones with excessive sodium. If you are not sweating enough, that is going to be bad for you. For optimal daily hydration, actually, I'm drinking some right now. Free of artificial flavors, sugars, and dyes, and only 5 calories per serving. And every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Visit nativehydrate.com/dailyclout to see what Native Hydrate could do for your health and save up to 44% off. Attention parents, I've got an early Christmas gift for you. We've all been there. 1 minute your kiddo is bouncing off the walls and an hour later they are super sick. You feel helpless and it can turn your plans upside down, especially on vacation. After thousands of customer requests, the wellness company has just launched the Kids Medical Emergency Kit. You no longer have to deal with emergency illnesses in panic mode. You can have 6 critical medications at your fingertips to treat 20 plus illnesses for issues like strep throat, ear infections, lice, respiratory illnesses, avoiding urgent cares and hospitals. The Kids Emergency Kit has been hand-selected by the wellness company's medical board and includes chewable amoxicillin, dissolvable ivermectin, and an optimal EpiPen, and more. This includes a detailed guidebook guiding you step-by-step in emergencies. Ordering this kit is simple. Only parents can order for their children. Fill out an intake form, and you will get verification call for consent. Then it's delivered to your door. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis and avoid late-night urgent care runs. Order your Kids Emergency Kit today and remove panic from your life. And if 1 or 2 scripts run out, there's a replenishment option to restock only on what you need. Go to dailyclouthealth.com and grab your Kids Emergency Kit right now. Use code Melissa to save up to $40 at checkout. These kits are only available in the USA. In the second half of the show, we are going to have on a state rep from the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. And it's going to be sort of a tale of 2 states, if you will, of 2 states where liberty, conservative, Freedom Caucus Republicans are the majority of the majority in the House. And I want to see if I'm giving them a warning on what's to come, because I just detailed this whole speaker race, and it is it's always a soap opera. Let's just say that. And the Freedom Caucus types tend to be the fighter people, and they have a hard time getting out of fight mode. Before we bring on Representative Knapp, a couple little things I've been working on that I thought maybe people would be interested in finding out about. So New Hampshire is a bit unique in that any state position, like a bureaucratic position, is not appointed by the governor. It is nominated by the governor, but then our executive council, which is a 5-member council that divides the power of the executive branch, they are elected positions. Like I have an executive counselor, and they have to vote to confirm any nominee from the governor. So we had a nominee for state librarian. By the way, I did not even know state librarian was even a thing until this whole thing came up, but apparently they are, and they are in charge of giving recommendations for library policies for school libraries and public libraries throughout the state. I don't know, probably 10 years ago, I would have thought, okay, what's the big deal? Who cares who the state librarian is? But obviously we've seen a lot of issues, specifically in school libraries, with inappropriate, basically completely pornographic material being available to children and parents wanting that taken out of libraries. So there was a nominee, and she was a leftist, like a beyond leftist. And I just don't understand why Governor Sununu has operated like this for all these years that he's been in there. He is a Republican. He was elected as a Republican to enact conservative Republican policy, and yet he has staffed all of his agencies, for the most part, with complete leftists who are not with the agenda that Governor Sununu was elected to enact. And so this is just another example. We need to start making sure we have people who are with the program. That is how you have effective governance. That is how you have effective leadership. We were supposedly handed a mandate by the people with this big Republican majority, but then we're just going to hand over even something like a state librarian position to the other side? That's crazy. So my executive counselor, who I would say is probably the most conservative counselor, he was like, no, we're not doing this. And he kind of put out a call, and my organization did take action. Also with Cornerstone Action, we were the 2 groups that put out an alert on her, and we got our people just to write emails to their executive counselors. And because frankly, they're just not used to getting that much activism for the most part, they immediately were like, whoa, we better do something. So next thing you know, the governor's calling and the counselors, and the counselors are like, listen, next meeting, we're voting to table this, and we are voting to make a public hearing, because with all of these, emails and everything, people have a right to have a public hearing on this appointment. And he was like, okay, I'll just withdraw her nomination. So he withdrew the nomination. So that's a great sign. And then I put out one email to my list saying, because we've opposed people in the past, but we haven't given them a viable alternative. So I put out ask and you shall receive. I put out a call asking if anybody knew of a good librarian. I have 2 conservative librarian nominees, and we're pushing them up the chain now. The one in particular, I don't know the one very well, but the other one I know very well. She's a former state rep. She is a librarian. She actually sued. She got fired when she became a state rep from her librarian job. And she sued because the reason why they fired her is because they found out she was a Republican. And she sued and won a free speech case. So I think she would be the perfect person to be a state librarian. But yeah, that's my little activism effort right now. Next month starts legislation, bills. All right. Before we bring on our guest, one more word from a sponsor. Birch Gold. Open a gold IRA with Birch Gold Group and get free silver coins shipped directly to your home. That's right. It's the most wonderful time of the year, when Birch Gold gives away a free silver American Eagle coin for every $5,000 purchased. And here's the best part. You don't have to pay a penny out of pocket. By December 20th, simply convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals, and Birch Gold will send your free silver coins directly to your home. Now you might be thinking, why do I need to diversify into gold? My guy's going to DC and things are good. But here's the fact. An administration trying to put a dent in a $36 trillion national debt in just 4 years is like a field mouse trying to stop a freight train. Unfortunately, that's true. We can't even afford to pay the interest on the debt, let alone the principal. So better be safe than sorry. Take action now to protect your savings. Text the word Daily Clout to 989898 for a free info kit on gold and claim your eligibility for free silver on your purchase from Birch Gold. But you must do this by December 20th. Again, text Daily Clout to the number 989898 for peace of mind that lasts longer than 4 years. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, Representative Christopher Knapp. I'm saying your name right, correct?
Correct. Yes. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Representative Knapp is a Wyoming state representative going into his 3rd or 4th term. You just gave me the rundown.
This will be I served a partial term. This will be my 3rd term I'm going into. So.
Okay. And you are the vice chair of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And how long has the Wyoming Freedom Caucus existed? Let's start there. When was it founded?
Well, originally it was founded in our House of Representatives. We had about 6 conservatives way back when, and they found themselves needing to very much support one another and rely on those principles and begin to grow. And so they founded what was originally our own Freedom Caucus. And once we began going with that, we increased to 12, we increased to 16, and ultimately connected with the national organization. And last year had 26 representatives reflective of either in the Freedom Caucus or a sphere of influence from the caucus. And this year in our elections, we actually took the House of Representatives and are represented in leadership with that caucus as well.
Yeah, no, I want to get into all of that and the dynamics, but of how things are going to change now that you're, sort of the majority of the majority. But first, I've talked quite a bit about Freedom Caucuses on this show. I was a member and in a leadership position of the New Hampshire House Freedom Caucus, which was never part of the national organization, but I do believe we were this first state Freedom Caucus. And but I think the one thing that I've not yet defined for people on this show, and maybe you can help me, is what makes a Freedom Caucus member different than a Republican member at large, like as a part of the larger Republican caucus?
So, as you know, the umbrella for the Republican caucus is very large, very wide ranging. And so for us, our definition is we represent the core of the Republican platform and also the defenders of the Constitution. So we basically become the conscience, if you will, of the Republican Party. And what you find in a lot of states is it is the failure of the Republican caucus at times that creates a beginning of a Freedom Caucus. And it's really to remind those Republicans that profess to stand by the platform and stand by the Constitution, and remind them on every bill and the principles of the Republican Party. And so that's the way I would define us, is at the core, we are the conscience of the Republican body in the House.
Yeah. And tell me, I don't know if this is true in other states. You know, New Hampshire's a little bit of a funky state in a lot of ways. And Liberty Republicans sort of have for a long time ruled sort of supreme, and so the Freedom Caucus is made up of a lot of sort of what I would refer to more as Liberty Republicans. So that would be people who are a little bit more on the Ron Paul end of the spectrum, right? Is that true in Wyoming, or are they more just kind of traditional hardcore conservatives?
I wouldn't say hardcore necessarily. I would just say if you leave government, and especially when you have all three bodies as well as a governorship, when you leave government to just run, I think sometimes it has a tendency to become a system within itself, whether it's a good old boy system, whether it's establishment, some people call it an establishment system. And I think that you do need people to come in that are just regular citizens. Mm-hmm. Citizens that come in and say, what are you doing here? And kind of begin to show the transparency of what has happened over time to become a system that wasn't meant to be necessarily. It does need to be reflective constantly of the people and the people's rights, the people's liberties, the people's freedoms. And sometimes when government goes along long enough, and the public is not awake and involved, that's what happens. And we're just basically normal people with the same principles coming together and saying, no, we represent the people, and this is how that transparency in our government should run.
So you have added seats to the Freedom Caucus election cycle after election cycle, which means that what you've done very effectively is not only fight the establishment, but make the broader public aware of what has really been going on so that they are able to vote for people who better reflect their values.
Yes, it's kind of exciting because you look at what's happened nationally, mm-hmm. and I think that's what Trump campaign did a very good job of, both during the campaign and before the campaign, is they began to peel back that layer after layer of government to show the people exactly what's happening in every aspect of government. They became very transparent and very educational in waking the people up. And I believe that's what's happened at the state level as well. And not only for just our legislature, but you see it in school boards, you see it in city government, county government, libraries, everything that you can think of has kind of reached this awakening point. And I think states that have done very well in advancing the caucus have have been states that have been successful at doing that, just like Trump has been very, very successful on a national level in waking up both Republicans and Democrats to what the government has been doing.
Right. It is, and I have been a part of this over the years, but it's a lot of fun. It can be to fight the system, and play sort of little political games as necessary. One of my things that I'm the most proud of from my time in the House was, in the middle of COVID and 2021, we were really fighting the governor, and we, the Freedom Caucus utilized the budget that we held hostage to end the COVID state of emergency and all of the lockdowns and restrictions. And that, actually, I can say it was fun now. At the time, it was very stressful.
How did the president of that? How uncivil of you to use procedures in place to affect change? Yes.
Well, right, exactly. Listen, you have not lived until you've been called a legislative terrorist. Okay, exactly. But now that you are the majority of the majority, how is that dynamic going to change? How are you going to shift from being in fight mode to being in leader mode, in governance mode?
I think that's the exciting part for me, is we're heading into this with basically a mandate from the people. They've decided what policies are going to be first in line to be handled. So, whether it's illegals being able to vote, core industries for us, Wyoming has been caught up in the climate change culture, I would say.
Right. The green energy rift. Yep.
Yes. And we're ground zero because we produce so much of the nation's energy from coal, oil, gas, and everything else. It has been a battle for literally the last 20 years. And we've come to a situation where
Republicans have been so caught up in that. They have just ceded right to the left on this point.
I think you're right. I think the minute they started saying climate change, the minute they started saying we need to come up with solutions and not fighting that first premise of is man-made climate change real? What is the cause? And we, from scientific studies, we don't believe that. And of course, this has been taught in schools. It's been, we will have 2 generations of kids that have grown up with this as a religion almost. And so it goes back to presenting a lot of bills that unravel this mess of energy, the mess of our freedoms being taken away. You mentioned the mask mandates and getting out of those COVID mandates. We were basically becoming a new class of citizen that had only certain rights if you complied with the mandates. And so, so becoming leadership, basically, we're going to take those bills that were very important to the public and put those as number one as our 5 most important priorities going forward. And, we still have the Senate to deal with. So you mentioned that dynamic of having both the House and the Senate. Ours is very much a coalition, depending on what bill you're talking about in our Senate. And so it's very difficult to get a majority, I would say, of conservatism on the Senate side. And so we'll continue, we'll put forth solutions and long-term solutions to the problems of Wyoming. And the light is now kind of on the Senate and the governor with that same transparency of saying, okay, we're putting forth measures that will solve problems for Wyoming citizens. Are you going to continue to cling to power? Are you going to continue to play gamesmanship with the public? Or are you going to actually listen to the voter who is now very much involved in the system? And if you don't, will it be at your peril? Because they are going to hold people accountable, and they're listening, they're watching, and they're educated. And so these things that come before the Senate, we'll do our job, and it's up to them to see if they will listen to the people.
Have you had your speaker race yet?
We have. We've got our speaker in place. Chip Nyman, who is a Freedom Caucus member, will be our speaker. We have a House Majority Leader in Scott, and our whip is also a member. Our Speaker Pro Temp is a member, so, or influenced by the caucus. And so we're pretty set on the House side. Our Senate chose to run candidates in slates instead of individually. And so you had some deal making going on that side, and ended up in maybe a majority of leadership that is not reflective, I think, of the people. And so committee chairmen and on down the line are not reflective of what the people voted on and wanted. And so we'll see. We're willing to work with the Senate side and the governor to try to keep away from technicality vetoes and things like that, and actually do some good for the people these next 2 years. But otherwise, we'll just do what we do, and we see it for what it is, and that's a transparency for the next election cycle. And so hopefully, I'm an optimist, eternal optimist. And so I think you have to be sometimes in politics, but we will work with them to make sure that we're doing the people's work, and we'll see what kind of establishment games we have in store for us. So,
a little warning. So, New Hampshire, sort of Freedom Caucus types have been the majority now for a while. And we do have our people in leadership, right? I would say, we have consistently had probably the most conservative, House majority leader in America for a very long time. And now what happened was that Freedom Caucus members could not get out of fight mode. And they started, even though these were their people, immediately when somebody gets in power, they start certain types, again, it's all about personalities, will now automatically view them as the establishment, even if they don't act that way at all. And so what has happened over the years is that there's been more and more friction amongst themselves, because sometimes and I've been trying to say this to people, sometimes you have to take yes for an answer.
mm-hmm.
You are being given what you want on a silver platter. You do not have to play games to someone who's asking how you want your present gift wrapped. Okay. And in a way, they've become spoiled. And I know some of you guys are watching. I'm just letting you know, you're becoming a little spoiled. Okay. So that's just a warning that
I see that, and that's in every segment of society, I think, too. Is you see it in corporations, you see it on boards, you see it in the public in general. There are certain people who are, I think, are in it for the right reason, which I would say is to the betterment of your state, the betterment for the citizens, to keep those principles, those Republican principles on hand, and live by that. But you will have people that are attracted to power. You'll have ego, you'll have narcissism, you'll have, and I always say that, this is a never ending battle, because if you believe in good in the world, there are also those other things in the world that are ego, narcissism, power, establishment, good old boy. And I view those on the other side of good, and those individuals need to be held in check. But politics sometimes attracts those individuals. And so you'll see it no different than any part of society. There'll be one or two or three or four, but they can cause quite a bit of disruption and faction the group that is conservative and focused. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's up to all of us to police each other, and to have those conversations, to say what is best for the people, and are we continuing to do that, or have we let those evils of the world creep in? And I think that's been from Roman times through today, and will be in the future. We will constantly be fighting this battle over and over again to make sure the people stay awake, stay aware, because the longer the people are in government, or the more that it attracts the people that it sometimes does, that you will fight this battle over and over again.
Yeah. I think something to remind people is that you are now working with leadership, and that is not an inherently evil thing as long as you are getting what you want. And sometimes you just have to ask now. You don't actually have to manipulate or play games. You could just ask, and you
Right.
will be handed what you ask for. And you need to be united with them now. And it sounds like you have a very similar dynamic to what we have going on here. And I'm hoping that I can try to get them to understand this year, but you can unite to fight the Senate, right?
Correct. And I do believe, we've concentrated as a caucus on the House side. We've not concentrated before on the Senate side. And that is one thing that I think we're living out. We have very principled, strong leaders on the House side. And I think that's why it has worked so well, and why we've gained numbers the way that we have. And again, we're willing to work with people that have been there a long time. Many of the House members actually fled to the Senate side too, and so you'll see that as well, that they saw the writing on the wall and kind of switched.
You mean
to
like more moderate types?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Those
that's
middle ground people. So the Senate, kind of got refilled, and it's just an interesting dynamic to work with.
Yeah. And like I said, I like activists to understand some of these inner workings. It helps inform, who you're going to work with, how you're going to work with them, how you're going to talk to them. If you understand these little political nuances of how your legislature works, it definitely helps a lot with getting things done. Well, congratulations on now being the majority of the majority. It's a great feeling, I know, and you guys are going to do great things, I'm sure. And like I said, I hope you can unite in your fight and your games against the Senate now to help push through your priorities all the way to the finish line. Politics is a roller coaster, right? There's so many ups and downs. It sometimes feels like getting one bill from beginning to end has so many different hurdles and in and outs. But
I've learned to be a little more patient. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And overall, it's little bits at a time, right? We didn't get to where we are now overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight either.
Right. And I think if you have that long game in mind, which our opponents typically do, they will move it inch by inch by inch, where we are solution driven and want to come up with bold and daring proposals. But I think if we do that policy wise in every area and come up with bills, whether it's 20, 25 bills, and work with those over time, to incrementally get to those policy changes, I think we'll do well. So
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. How can people find you?
They can find us on, I should add that ready.
Are you on social media or no?
We are on social media, and it is WyomingFreedomCaucus.com. That should have been easy for me. But thank you for having me, and certainly we appreciate what you do. In every state, there are fighters, and there are lobbyists and for liberty, and I think that what you're doing is a yeoman's work, and hopefully everybody in every state does the same thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the whole point of this show is I'm trying to make people realize it's not as hard as you think it is. It doesn't actually even take as much time as you think it will. It really just takes a lot of people doing a little bit of work to, make a better society that's more free.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Right. Well, that's it for the Liberty Lobbyist. You can find me on X at Melissa Blasek NH or at Rebuild NH. If you have any thoughts about today's show, feel free to email me, director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.